Hi, my name is Amelia and I'm 22. Have you ever suspected someone of lying and wanted to expose them? Watch the rest of this video and find out how I spied on the nanny through a hidden camera and what I saw on the recording. 2 years ago, I gave birth to a son, Nick, from my husband, Kyle. He is 23, we have been living together for 3 years, and Kyle is almost the same as our baby, just as helpless. All day long, he sits at home at the computer and writes his programs. He does not know how to cook or take care of his son. He wears the same t-shirts for weeks, sometimes forgets to wash and brush his teeth. From his appearance, you would think that he is a homeless person and not a leading programmer in a large IT company. I took care of my son and my husband. It was exhausting. And then my boss gently hinted that it would be better for me to get out of my decree to work and prepare a financial report for the whole year. My head was spinning. I didn't want to leave my boys at home alone, but I was also afraid of losing my job. And I had to get back to the office a little earlier. At first, when I came home from work, my hair stood on end. The apartment was in complete chaos. My son was all in pain, hungry and crying. My husband was sitting at the computer and did not see what was happening under his nose. I didn't have the energy left for them, so on the advice of a friend, I hired a nanny. Debbie, she was 18. Have you ever used a nanny or carer? At first, I was worried that a stranger would be in the house. How would she take care of my son? Because she was so young. But after the first week of her work, I calmed down. Nick was smiling, clean, and well-fed. And Kyle even started to look neat. Perhaps he was ashamed of wearing a dirty t-shirt in front of a guest. I let out a little breath and went back to work, but over time, I started noticing strange things. A month later, my son began to meet me with tears. I asked Debbie what was wrong. She said he was just teething. I wanted to believe her, but I had my doubts. It seemed that Nanny wasn't always honest with me. My husband also started behaving strangely. He not only combed his hair every morning, but also shaved, which he never did, even for me. I came home once to find that our entire bed in the bedroom was crumpled and strewn across the bed, even though I had made it up before I left. And that night, when I wanted romance and love, Kyle was colder than ever. He said he was tired and fell asleep with his back to me. I was offended. I kept thinking that Kyle was ignoring me for a reason. Maybe he had a crush on the nanny and was having an affair with her, and he was not interested in me anymore. I was wondering how I could figure out what was going on while I was at work. I went to Debbie's social media profile page to see if she had a boyfriend, and I saw a bunch of photos with guys much older. My husband was exactly her type. I was beginning to worry that Debbie was hitting on Kyle in my absence. I shared my suspicions with a friend, and she advised me to put cameras in the house to understand what was happening behind my back. I never cheated on my husband. We shared everything. I decided to tell him about the cameras and see how he reacted. If Kyle supported me, then he had nothing to hide, and I had made up my mind. But my husband's reaction alarmed me. When he heard about the cameras in the bedroom and living room, he was categorically against it, saying that it was a violation of the right to privacy. Why did he want to protect the rights of the nanny? He definitely had something to hide. I didn't expect such a reaction from my husband and began to fear that he was cheating on me with Debbie. I couldn't ask directly, but I might have been wrong. And I had no choice but to set up a hidden camera without Kyle's knowledge. Look where I ended up. But I didn't want to be deceived. I had to. After I put the camera up while my husband was sleeping, I went to work and was restless all day. I was afraid Kyle would find that camera and make a scene. Then I started to worry that if I was right and Kyle was cheating on me, Then now he was tumbling with Debbie in our bed in front of our son. I couldn't wait for tonight to come home and watch this recording. When I got home from work, a worried Debbie stopped me in the living room and told me she had something to tell me. She had a guilty shock. A conscience must be a terrible thing. She was sitting with my son and sleeping with my husband. I would feel really guilty too. I couldn't wait to watch the tape, so I asked Debbie to postpone the conversation. I wanted to expose her and Kyle, to throw them out in disgrace. Have you ever suspected your boyfriend or husband of cheating? I rushed into the bedroom, got my camera from the closet, closed it, and started looking. And what I saw made me angry. In the video, Kyle entered the room in a bathrobe, turned on the music, and slowly began to take off his robe. Under it, he was completely naked, and then he dropped the robe on the dresser and covered the camera lens. I couldn't see anything further, but I could hear it perfectly. A girl appeared in the bedroom and began to compliment Kyle. Then they plopped down on the bed, she started laughing and then loudly and quickly breathing, and then it all ended with her moans. Everything became clear to me. Kyle and Debbie had a great time together while I was working. I was ready to kill them. I gave birth to Kyle's son, took care of both of them, and he traded me for this girl. Traitor. I wish there had been an image. I would have shown them their home video to see their reaction. It wasn't the first time Debbie had done this. Who knows whose husband she seduced before? The nanny should have been put in her place. But I didn't have any real proof that it was Debbie's voice. Then I decided to catch them red-handed, catch them at the most inopportune moment, to throw them both out. The next day, I left work early so that I could get home for dinner, when I was definitely not expected. I entered the house and was startled. A tearful Debbie sat in the living room with Nick, playing a game of Meccano. The baby was fine. I asked Debbie what happened, and then she burst into tears and said she couldn't hide it from me anymore. I told Debbie coldly and sternly that I knew, that I didn't need her to tell me everything, and asked where Kyle was. Debbie's mouth dropped open and she pointed to the bedroom. I wish I could have found them there together. But now I had Debbie's confession, which was enough to break up this circus to hell. I walked into the bedroom with a triumphant air and just froze. My Kyle was lying on the bed completely naked, and next to him was my laptop, from which came the same female voice I'd heard on the recording. I looked at the monitor. There was a naked girl who saw me and immediately turned everything off. Kyle jumped in surprise and started dressing abruptly. I was furious. I grabbed my laptop and threw it with all my might. Kyle was confused and said that I shouldn't be so nervous and frighten our son. I had to restrain myself from leaping at him and scratching his face, but for our son's sake, I decided to calm down and listen to my husband. Kyle admitted to having an affair. He met a girl on the internet a couple of months ago and fell in love. This had not happened to him for a long time. He wanted to tell me about it, but did not have time. He knew that he was guilty, but he couldn't help it. I didn't like to hear it. I got up and calmly told him that tomorrow he would not be here. Kyle immediately rushed to collect his things. He didn't even try to change my mind. I was sorry I was wrong about him and my nanny. I left the bedroom, and Debbie ran up to me with a sympathetic look and told me that we were a very good couple and it was painful for her to watch my husband cheat on me. She cursed herself for not saying it as soon as she noticed it. She was a good girl. What would I do without her? When Kyle went to live with his mistress, I was left alone with Nick, and Debbie started spending even more time with us, and we even became friends. She took care of my son like a little brother. I did not regret hiring her. I trusted her. At that time, I had made a big mistake and had trusted the wrong person. But one way or another, I got rid of the toxic person and attracted a new, bright person into my life. If you like my story, please like and subscribe to my channel. Have a good day. Let only honest and decent people surround you.
Hi, I'm Julie. I'm 17 years old. Has it ever happened that you immediately felt something bad when you met a person? As if you feel that you need to run away from him? I know it sounds weird, but I did. Watch this video to the end and you will find out what the inconspicuous teacher can hide. It all started with the fact that, because of my poor eyesight, my mother decided that it would be better for me to study at home. Don't think that I've become a recluse and have no friends. Since childhood, I've had a group of girls with whom we are still friends. We often go out together and have girls' night, so I don't feel alone. Even with my studies, I never had any problems, and I always studied alone. But the senior class came, and my mother decided that I could not cope on my own. My mother wanted me to go to a prestigious college, so she hired me a math tutor. I didn't like Mr. Sars right away. He was somewhat nervous and pale, and the material was explained in a low voice. When my mother passed us, he even twitched and started to blush immediately. But mostly, he was just a boring teacher who was preparing me for exams. Have you ever disliked a person at first sight? After almost every lesson, I told my mother to fire Mr. Sars and send him out of our house. But she insisted that I needed to study well for my exams if I wanted to pass them successfully and go to college, because education was so important. She always said that because she hadn't had a chance to graduate from college before, so she did everything she could to make sure that didn't happen to me. Of course, I agree with my mother. Studying is important. But this obnoxious teacher made me uneasy, and my mother was acting strangely. I once went for a run in the park next to our house, but I forgot my water bottle. I had to go back, and as I was approaching the house, I saw something from afar that I wanted to erase from my memory forever. My mother kissed Teacher Sars, and he got in the car and drove away. I just didn't understand what was going on. My mother and Mr. Sars? How was this even possible? My first thought was to run to my mother and ask her everything. But I didn't. I decided that I would not tell my mother anything, and I would start watching them. I just couldn't believe my mom was dating a nasty math teacher. I needed to find out how serious it was. I started paying attention to Sars and my mother, and I found a pattern. When I left the house, they immediately met and cooed sweetly together, just like doves. But when I was home and we were studying, they acted like strangers. This made me incredibly angry. I wanted to tell them to their faces, but the thought of my mother stopped me. I understood that after my father left us, my mother wanted to start a new relationship and be loved. But this teacher made me suspicious. So I wanted to somehow set him up. Maybe he was not who he said he was. So I had a plan. During one of our lessons, I put on a very revealing outfit, and my mother went to the store in the time. Everything went according to plan. I tried in every possible way to approach the teacher, to seduce him, but he did not give in to provocations, and was even afraid of it. When I sat down closer, he immediately sat apart and constantly wiped the sweat from his forehead. I could see that he was nervous and kept looking at his watch, looking away from me. After a failed attempt to provoke him, I decided that I would follow him to find out what he was doing outside of our house. But after observing Sars's movements for several days, unfortunately, I saw nothing suspicious. In addition to me, he was a tutor for several other families and after work went to the store and home. That's all. I was rather disappointed. I already gave up and was going to tell my mother straight out. I even prepared a speech that proved why they were a bad couple and why I didn't want them to date. But when I came downstairs, Mom said she had a surprise for me. At first, I was very happy, but then my mother moved away, and behind her sat the teacher and awkwardly waved at me. Now, I didn't understand exactly what was going on. This surprise got me freaking out. But then, my mother happily said that from today he would live with us. This was the last straw. I turned and slammed the door of my room. And what would you feel when a new man of your mother's appeared in your house who was a complete stranger to you? I was very angry with my mother. How could she do this to me? It was just not fair of her because we always shared everything. If she liked him, why didn't she tell me right away? I didn't let her into my room and I organized a strike, and I didn't have any more lessons with Mr. Sars. Just seeing him in the bathroom or in the hallway made me angry. So I sat in my room for several days and didn't leave it. This was my world where everything was good. I didn't have here this strange Sars who was definitely something, but I just couldn't figure out what it was. After a while, I came to terms with the fact that there was a new person in our house, but I still didn't like him and I often ignored him. Because of his work, he was often away from home, so it was tolerable. When he was at home, he cleaned, cooked, and tried to be nice. But at the same time, he was very strange. He didn't have many things, like he was moving out tomorrow. But my mother had blossomed and looked at him with such loving eyes. It broke my heart. It wasn't until later that I realized why he was acting like this. Once I went to a friend's birthday party with a sleepover. We had a great time, and for the first time in a long time, I was in a good mood. But when I got home in the morning, I noticed that Mr. Sars' car was not there. The door of the house was open, and my mother was not in the house at all. I got scared. I ran into the house and started calling and looking for my mother. When I went to her room, I found her tied to a chair and unconscious. Mom! I started to untie her, immediately called an ambulance, and we left. My mother was barely breathing. I was very worried about her and afraid of losing her. I was sitting in the corridor and I couldn't see anything around me. The doctor was about to come out and tell me what happened. At that moment, I even forgot about Sars and did not think about where he had gone. Finally, the doctor came out and said that my mother had overdone the sleeping pills mixed with alcohol, so she would have to stay at home for a few days. He warned that if something like this happened again, it could end badly, and she was lucky I found her in time. It was definitely not about my mom, and I began to suspect that Sars was involved. When we got home, I started asking my mother what had happened, but she was very weak and did not remember anything, only that they decided to have a romantic dinner. Everything went well. He kissed her. They drank wine. Apparently, he secretly used sedatives and, to be sure, tied her. I couldn't believe that my mother had been treated like this. And then, I remembered that there was a surveillance camera on the street side of our house, and I could see what he was doing. When I saw the recording, I was furious. While my mother was passed out, he took out all the jewelry, money, and electrical appliances. He just robbed us. I was furious. Now I realized that when he was acting strange and cleaning everywhere, he just studied where everything was. It turned out that he had robbed several other women that night. So the next day, we filed a report with the police, and they opened a case against him. My mother was depressed, because now it would be even more difficult for her to open up to men and find love. I supported her in every possible way and was always there for her. But I was bursting with anger at this freak. I wanted him caught and punished, and I hope they will. Sars did not take everything into account, so the police tracked his appearance on the cameras and made a sketch, and my mother and I tried to describe him as accurately as possible. We gave the police all his belongings, and there was hope that justice would prevail. My mother and I began to forget about it a little, and my mother felt better. We didn't look for tutors anymore, but not out of fear. I just decided that I could handle it myself. If you have ever encountered scammers, then write about it in the comments. subscribe to the channel, put likes, and be careful. Have a nice day.
Hi, my name is Alana. I'm 16. What are you proud of in your appearance? I am proud of my gorgeous hair. It would be a tragedy for me to lose it, but it happened. Watch this story to the end, and you will learn how I lost my hair but gained a loved one. I have a sister, Hannah, who is 15, but few people know about this because it is a real shame to have such a sister. She doesn't consider it necessary to look even a little cute. She has never gone to a party in her life. Of course, she never had a boyfriend, but she's smart. I mean, a complete nerd. So I try not to communicate with her in public and generally pretend that she does not exist. Will she understand my joy? I sent an application for the Miss 16 beauty contest, and I was accepted. This was the chance of my life. My friends helped me prepare. We came up with a cool outfit and an amazing event. The whole family came to support me, including Hannah. More people seemed to be looking at Hannah's ridiculous costume than at the stage. If someone realized that this scarecrow was my sister, I would be kicked out in disgrace. And here was the finale, me and some other girl. It was obvious to me, but the jury decided that we needed to complete another task. Oh my God, not this! Science quiz. It seemed I got into the Miss Nerd contest. I knew I was in trouble. Hannah knew all this for sure. I looked at her in despair. Hannah was sending me some signs. I tried to decipher them. It turned out so-so. And because of this stupid quiz, I lost the contest. Have you ever had an important mission go sour because of some stupid little thing? Write it in the comments how it happened. The world around me was suddenly gray and dark. Nothing pleased me. Hannah was babbling something. Just like an old grandmother, she said modern competitions were not only about beauty, but also about a harmonious, multifaceted personality. I asked as politely as I could for her to leave immediately. It's good that there are real friends in the world who came, comforted, told me what a terrible competitor I had. That's what I understand. A real support. I felt like I was coming to life. I even had the strength to find a new competition where I could be appreciated. But it turned out that geeks got in there too. The first stage was not a photo in the image or even a video of talents, but an essay on the topic external beauty is even more precious when it covers the internal. This phrase was invented by some Shakespeare. I googled him. Ugly, old, and bearded. Clearly, he did not understand anything about beauty. I spent 2 days without sleep or rest working on my essay. I even wrote the first line, but it didn't go any further. Suddenly there was a knock on the door. Hannah brought me a cup of hot chocolate. I was so tired of this stupid essay that I even complained to Hannah, and she said she could help me. And in 2 hours, she wrote a huge text. There was everything that the jury might like. Something about ecology, something about world peace, and some other bullshit. Anyway, Hannah's essay received a high score and I was called to the next stage. In honor of my success, my friends threw a huge party. The day before, my mother called me aside and said that it would be nice to thank Hannah and call her too, but she would disgrace me there. Although, to be fair, she did help me. I told Hannah to come, but to dress decently so that I wouldn't have to blush for her. She promised me faithfully. I came to the party earlier. Hannah still had to go to the library. So I only found out about her arrival when I was asked to go see the horror show. She was standing in the doorway in the dress I was going to throw away with her curls straightened. One of the girls said she was like me if I had been a comedy character. Throughout the party, I tried not to meet Hannah or even be in the same room with her. I would have called my party a failure if it wasn't for Zach. He was my friend's brother, a very cute and awesome pitcher. At this party, we finally managed to communicate properly. I think he liked me too. Then, at the most crucial moment, Hannah barged into the room and demanded that I talk to her. Why were these smart people so crazy? I explained to her as best as I could that she was a little out of time, and she whined and ran home. What a relief. Zach was very cool, but it was time to go home. I already imagined what I would get from my parents for hurting my poor little sister. But everything was quiet at home. According to the folks' version, Hannah just left early so as not to oversleep for school. Here's the news. Hannah didn't go snitching. Why such a gift? However, she refused to explain anything to me. She ignored me. On the weekend, we went to see new furniture for our rooms. And we met Zach at the store. What a surprise! Hannah suddenly turned as red as a tomato at the sight of Zach. Why would that be? And when Zach asked me out, she stepped on my foot with all her might. When I howled, Hannah said in a sweet voice that our parents were waiting for us, so we should hurry. And she took me away from Zach. Am I so lucky? Or are your siblings also interfering with your personal life? Tell us in the comments if you have had this experience. For the second stage of the competition, it was necessary to prepare a musical number. I made up a great story. At the beginning of the number, I would have a high hairstyle with a lot of ribbons, like in the series about the French Queen. And in the middle of the song, I would let my hair down in one movement and it would fall over my shoulders. For the number, I needed a person who would stand in the wings and hand me the props. As luck would have it, none of my friends could. Suddenly, Hannah said that she would be happy to help me. Just before my number, I ran into the dressing room for a second and suddenly caught my hair on the hanger. What fool put it there? I was in the trap. Neither here nor there. In my desperation, I started screaming for help. Hannah came running. She tried to pull the hanger out of my hair, but it was stuck. Hannah said that she would have to cut the ribbons. It was a disaster, but I decided it was better than being tied to a hanger. I decided to change the number. I would go out immediately with my hair down. Hannah took a pair of scissors, and then I saw my own hair flying at my feet. I jerked to get out and pulled out a huge chunk of my hair. I felt my head. It was a nightmare. Creepy, shaggy, blunt bob. It was beyond repair. With such a nightmare on your head, you can't show yourself to people. I lunged at Hannah, but she dodged me. She started yelling at me, sobbing. It turned out that she had been in love with Zach for ages, and she was wildly jealous that Zach had chosen me over her, and she decided to take revenge. I ran away, and from this competition where I could only disgrace myself, and from damned Hannah. Of course, the hair couldn't be saved, but maybe I could still think of something. It would be better to wear a wig so that no one could see the horror on my head. But at home, another portion of the nightmare was waiting for me. Someone had already uploaded my photos from behind the scenes online, and under them, there were already a lot of comments with laughing and vomiting emoticons. One girl from our class, who I thought was my friend, had even done a meme. Your photo before and after walking through the trash. There were jokes in my DMs, such as whether I now worked as a scarecrow and whether I cut my hair with a lawnmower. Ha ha. I decided not to leave the house until my hair grew back. I sat there and hated myself. Everyone laughed at me and bullied me, like they did with Hannah. My God, it turned out that my sister experienced this every day. Poor Hannah. How strong she had to be that she didn't break. I cried because I was among those who bullied my sister. I ran to Hannah and begged her to forgive me. She apologized for her stupid outburst, but I thanked her. It wasn't until I lost my gorgeous hair that I could understand how my sister felt. I promised Hannah that I would help her become beautiful. We went shopping together and I helped her choose beautiful modern clothes. I taught her how to make up. I showed her that she could be absolutely beautiful, but not the way I was. Hannah was happy. And for the first time, I felt that I had done something good for someone close to me. And it was as good as winning the coolest beauty contest. Put a like if you like my story. Subscribe to the channel. There will be a lot more interesting stories here. Hello everyone, my name is Ruriko and I'm 18 years old. What do you think of asylums? How do you imagine them? I've been terrified of getting to an asylum all my life. And then the worst nightmare came true. Watch this video to the end and find out what kind of asylum I ended up in. I had a terrible family, just awful. Dad and Mom drank, maybe not too much, but often enough to have terrible fights with each other. When I was little, I was often with them at these moments, and you can't imagine how scared I was. Once my mother threw me at my father in a rage. I fell short and hit the floor hard. Dad started yelling at Mom about what the hell she was doing to her kid, but instead of helping me, he started fighting with her. That's my family. I started hallucinating around the same time. I saw some people, sometimes dead, talking to me, trying to play, and I only realized later that it wasn't real. But they looked so real. You know what happens when you tell your parents about your problem and it only makes it worse? When I mentioned my visions to my mother, she promised to put me in an asylum. I knew that something was wrong with me, but as I imagined that I would be locked in a cell among dangerous, crazy people, I started to shake, I started to cry, I could not calm down after that. In college, the situation got worse. It's just that I fell in love. Yes, I fell in love for the first time in my life. We got a new guy and I lost my head. Do you believe in love at first sight? Yes, I know, you must first understand a person, get to know him. I understand all this. But I remember that I just looked at him into his intelligent gray eyes and I got carried away. The hallucinations did not recede, but new ones were added to them. I started seeing Clancy everywhere. He talked to me, courted me, held me when I cried in my room. It was not the same as talking to a real person, but it was a pleasure I couldn't have imagined. I didn't have any friends. Clancy appeared so often in my visions that I soon lost my guard. The teacher made fun of me, said that I was stupid and never brought the correct tasks. I burst into tears and ran to the toilet. I was very upset. And then I saw Clancy. It seemed to me that he was stroking my head and soothing me. I missed it so much. But then I heard laughter. I didn't know at first if it was real or not. But when I looked back, I realized that I was totally screwed. Girls from senior year were standing in the doorway taking pictures of me on their cell phones. And they laughed loudly. Have you ever been in a humiliating situation? When you did something really scary and awkward and were laughed at for it? This was the first time I had experienced something like this. I felt bitter and hurt. But I was also torn inside with rage. So I threw myself at the one closest to me. I knocked her cell phone out of her hand. It crashed on the floor, and I attacked her face. She screamed, and her friends started to hit me and pull me away, and I kept hitting her as hard as I could. At home, a real horror was waiting for me. My father beat me. My mother stood by and said that everything was right, that God was punishing me, and that I was sick, and I should be put in an asylum and electrocuted until I ended up like a vegetable. I was locked in a room, and then my mother came with a shaman. That's what he called himself. She told him that I was demon-possessed, that I had let a demon into me, and now I needed help in exorcising it. Then there was some kind of phantasmagoria. This man poured hot water on me, almost boiling water, recited the same spell, and periodically whipped me with rods from branches. I was exhausted from my dad's beating, and I couldn't really fight back. And I wouldn't have if it hadn't been for Clancy. I saw his face, full of pain, and I knew that if I didn't save myself, no one would. I ran hard, pushing the shaman away. I ran out of the house and ran through other people's yards towards the center. My father ran after me, but somehow I found the strength. I didn't slow down, didn't stumble, and even passed a dog that started barking at me. I stopped in an unfamiliar place when I was absolutely sure that I was lost from sight. I was cold and hungry, and I didn't have any money or documents with me. So be it. Screw it. I'm not going back there. I hid behind a dumpster in the most private place I could find and started crying. My world was shattered, and I felt small and empty. I don't know what would have happened if Clancy hadn't reappeared. He hugged me, stroked me, and told me that I was very strong, that I had done the right thing, and that he loves me very much. He almost cradled me with these words. I listened to him, wept, and fell asleep with my eyes wet with tears. I was picked up by the police, of course. Well, at least not by homeless and drug addicts. Have you ever felt so tired that you don't care what happens to you anymore? I told them everything. Clancy was sitting next to me, and I had nothing to hide from the police. They brought a man to me. He turned out to be very pleasant, cheerful, and he spoke to me simply without scolding or getting attached. He told me straight out that I was showing signs of schizophrenia, and that it would be good for me to stay in an asylum for a while. It turned out that I was not completely indifferent. At these words, I almost jumped out of the window. I was, of course, comforted and reassured in every possible way. Like it was not going to be like in a horror movie, and they wouldn't tie me to a bed, and they wouldn't do a lobotomy. Yep, of course. But that's what they say in the movies, and then, let's try it, and if it's hard for you, we'll move you somewhere else, okay? That's how he asked me. I was scared. I was terrified. Yes, I would prefer to sit in jail with bad guys. But he was actually right. I really had nowhere to go. I just didn't have a home, and social welfare would also take care of my nerves. Oh, why didn't I keep silent? All right, I said, but I'll run if you turn me into a vegetable. So I became a patient at a clinical institute. I'm really bad at remembering names. I was waiting for a dark, stinking place where people howled in pain, moaned, and wed themselves, and nurses injecting them with drugs that kill their personality. In reality, it was just a clinic, just like others, like dentistry, surgery, and other places. They put me in a solitary ward and gave me books. I could go down to the game room to sculpt from plasticine, draw, communicate, but only a few hours a day. I was given medication, and I was treated individually. But I kept seeing Clancy. I saw him in the game room. I saw him when I was walking. He always sat on the same bench. He didn't act the same as before. On the contrary, he didn't seem to see me. I was afraid to approach him, did not want to contact him. The doctor told me that the first thing to do with your hallucinations was to distance yourself from them, to understand that it was not real, it was not true. Wasn't therapy helping me? Was I terminally ill? Because of my visions, the treatment was extended for a couple of days, but I still saw Clancy. On the very last day, I couldn't stand it, took the doctor literally by the hand to the restroom and pointed out my hallucination. He didn't move a millimeter, didn't follow me. Was this normal for glitches? Suddenly, the doctor was amused and went to the corner where Clancy was sitting and said, "Hi, I didn't know you knew Rurico." Clancy? Wait. Was I imagining this? I saw everything for real? How did you get here? Clancy was surprised too. He said that he was being treated for a drug addiction and regularly came to put the drip. Sometimes he stayed, with the doctor's permission, to sleep in the clinic because his parents were heavily addicted to drugs and living with them in the same house could be unbearable. Clancy's story broke my heart. I told him about myself, my family, my problems. What I didn't say was that he was the one who'd been following me all these days. Clancy took me by the hand and said, "Oh well, we'll get through this." I blushed and said, "Yes, Clancy and I will return to the hospital more than once, but it doesn't frighten me too much now." How did you imagine such facilities? Share it in the comments. Subscribe and like the video so that other YouTube users can see it. And send us your mind-blowing stories to see them later on the channel. Hi, I'm Betty and I'm 18. I always wanted a big family, 2 or 3 children. It's good when dreams come true. What if the dream suddenly increases in size and 6 babies are about to be born at once? Watch the video to the end and find out how I became a mother of many children. I'm an only child, but I've always wanted a sibling. It's a pity that my parents were always so involved in their business that they didn't have enough time or energy to expand the family. They gave me a lot of things: a great school, the best things, toys, classes, but I was always terribly lonely. At least in college there was a crowd of people and a lot of worries. My parents were running around with their business. They were having some problems, and my studies had already drained the last money from their accounts. So I got a job at a cafe. I quickly made friends there and met Bill. From the very beginning, it was clear what was going on. He started courting me almost immediately. He bought ice cream, invited me to the movies, and gave me cheap trinkets. It was clear how everything would end, but it happened quite suddenly. We were alone, closing the shift, but the last thing we thought about was work. We had made out at work before while no one was looking, but here, we got carried away. Have you ever been like this? You know you have to stop, but you just don't have the strength to do it? It is clear that we did not prepare for this and therefore did not use protection. I tensed as soon as we finished. You never know what could have happened. But Bill told me to relax and said that he had done everything right and I didn't have to worry about getting pregnant. And I believed him. Maybe it was because all I thought about at work was Bill, but I didn't have a lot of money, and at some point it started to seriously interfere with my life. I didn't want to admit it, but my parents spoiled me terribly and I wasn't ready to save on food. Bill, of course, listened to all my whining and at one point suggested that we just move in together. It would be cheaper, plus we would have all the time in the world with each other and there would be no need to hide in corners to be alone. Why not? We loved each other. I hadn't planned for such a serious relationship at the time, but that just happened, and I agreed. Everything was fine, but after a couple of weeks I got sick. I had no strength for anything. The smell of food made me sick. In the morning I felt like I had a hangover, and I was constantly hungry. When I realized that I didn't just want food, but ice cream at 3 in the morning and strawberry ice cream, even though I couldn't stand it, I realized that this wasn't food poisoning. I bought a pregnancy test, and it was positive. Why the hell didn't I think of this beforehand? That was all I needed now. How would I tell my parents? They would kill me, and Bill? He would definitely leave me. He didn't have the responsibility to carry condoms. My God, what should I do with my studies? Bill was the first to know. He was silent for a long time at first. Then he laughed nervously, made me do a second test so that he would not doubt it, and finally hugged me. I calmed down. It meant that he would not leave. At least I was not alone. And then he asked me to marry him. That was a bigger shock than pregnancy. I thought about foolishly getting pregnant, but I didn't think about getting married after only dating for a couple of months. But Bill was right, even if he didn't buy me a ring. We had to save for our child. Anyway, we were really a family. Bill went to work, I studied and looked after the house as much as possible, cooking and preparing for the birth. We were waiting for our first child, and this event divided my entire life into before and after. But soon these thoughts began to fade. It was hard to live on one salary, but Bill didn't want to go to a second job. We owed our friends a considerable amount of money, and I often asked myself the question, how should we go on living? Even more frightening, Bill began to wonder if we could afford a child. Afford? This was a child and he already existed. If we could have changed anything, that moment was long gone. Bill had given me hope and now he was taking it away from me. Not only that, he started coming home later, drinking, telling me off for being idle, and talking endlessly about money. Of course, there wasn't any, but why was he doing this to me? We were family. Honestly, I didn't want to get married at all. Not to him, and not so early. But I thought it was better for the child. Yes, it was difficult with Bill, but it would be more difficult to be alone. Even though we were starting to piss each other off, he supported me. Who else would I go to with this? It was clear that I could have called my parents, but I delayed that moment, afraid of their reaction. But as time passed, life with Bill began to seem worse than their disappointment. So I braced myself and decided that I would tell them in person. And I invited them to visit. What do you do when you are 100% sure that you will get a scolding? How do you set yourself up and calm yourself down? Share it in the comments. My parents were going to have a hard time finding out that I was living with a guy, that I was pregnant, and that we were barely making ends meet. This was a surprise for them. That's how I didn't bother them with my problems or distract them from what was important. Of course, Mom and Dad were furious, accusing me of not coming to them right away. They cursed me, themselves, and Bill. Then they complained that they were to blame, that they paid little attention to me and brought me up poorly. On the same day, I was given money and sent to the doctor to find out the child's condition. And there, I found out that in the womb was not one and not two babies, but 6. 6! Do such things happen? The news didn't just scare me, it literally shocked me. I sat in a stupor for about 5 minutes before I started to get really nervous. I wanted to run away from everyone and not think about it, and then vice versa, to cuddle up to my mother. If only I didn't have to deal with all this. I needed so much support, but I didn't dare take it out on my parents. Bill was the first to recognize it. Instead of kissing me and hugging me and calming me down, he got mad and started yelling that he wasn't ready to be a father of 6 children at once and that he was still young and all that. I asked him not to panic and not to leave me. I couldn't do it alone, but all the persuasions ended up in a big fight. There was no one else to support me, so I crawled back to my parents. That same day, they packed up my things and took me home. I was so depressed that I didn't know what was going on around me or how I was going to continue my studies, even though they had planned everything for me. I missed Bill very much and I called him, but he ignored my messages and didn't pick up the phone. I was terribly worried because we had a fight, but we didn't find out everything calmly. We were going to raise these children together. We had decided to get married. I called our mutual friend, Jessica. It turned out that this scoundrel had already got another girlfriend and did not even think about me. I was furious, but I couldn't just forget the dream of a strong family that he was a part of. So I asked Jessica to set up a meeting for us at the mall. Yes, I had to run away from home, pregnant with 6 babies in my stomach, The stupidest thing I had ever done. Bill wasn't happy to see me. We had another fight, and I accepted that he didn't want anything to do with me and our kids. We continued to fight right on the escalator. He brought me to tears. I couldn't talk to him anymore and ran down. At the bottom of the stairs, I stumbled and fell face first. I immediately felt a sharp pain in my stomach. There was a lot of commotion, and Bill was sitting next to me and called an ambulance, but he got the hell out of there before the doctors got to me. My parents came to the hospital. They were outraged that I ran away and almost killed my own children. Thank God they were all right. What infuriated them the most was Bill's cowardice. Only then did I realize that I could only rely on them. My parents couldn't calm down about Bill and even wanted to file a police report because I might have a miscarriage. But I begged them not to touch him and just forget. After all, it was he who gave them 6 grandchildren at once. Now I live in my own house, which my parents rented for me and my future children. I feel safe and cared for here. I am happy because very soon the most cherished dream will come true. A big and strong family. My studies will also wait for me. All in good time. If you like my story, please like and subscribe to the channel. And the bell icon will not allow you to miss new episodes in case something else happens to me. Have a good day and remember that family is the main thing.